Hello there everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make this snakeskin wrap bracelet using DiamonDuos to achieve the effect. And this is what mine looks like here, the one that I made, is using these colours. I thought they would go really nicely together and give a bit of a pastel-y and almost like a summer feel look to it. Obviously you can use whatever you want to. So using these DiamonDuos, I feel that you get this kind of snakeskin effect because of how they lay in the wrap bracelet. And I just finished it off with a button here and then a loop for the closure. So it's nice and easy and simple to put on and off, and also comfortable to wear because the back side of the DiamonDuos is nice and flat and it looks like that. So if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching. So these are the things that we're going to need. First of all, here I have the main cord that we're going to use. This is a 2mm leather cord that I'm using here. It's just a black colour. And then we'll need the beads. These are all the same bead. These are DiamonDuo beads. So they got 2 holes. And I'm just using 3 different colours because I thought that would be a nice colour combination with the cord as well. But you can use however few or many colours that you want to. So you can just use one or you can use more. That's completely up to you. And then to add those beads into the bracelet, what we'll need is some thread. Here I have an S-lon size D. So it's basically just a sewing thread. Again in a black colour because that matches the cord. You could also use a contrasting colour to the cord, so to make it stand out and give it a different look. That's completely up to you as well. And then to use that, I have some beading needles. I'm using 2 because we're going to be using 2 at the same time to build this. And then to finish it off, I have my button here. This is a Shank button that I'm just going to use with a loop closure. And finally, right here, I just have kind of a random bead. This is a 4mm round in a dark grey, blackish colour. That's just what I'm using, or a 6/0 seed bead. You can really use whatever you want. This is just right at the end to fill in a little gap. So you can use one bead like me, or you can use several smaller seed beads. That's completely up to you as well. So let's get it all together and let's get started. And then we need to get a cord and our thread ready to be able to use it. So first of all, here I have my leather cord. So in this case, I'm just making a single wrap for the bracelet. But obviously if you're doing double or triple wrap, whatever you want to do, you're going to need a different length than this. But I'm using 80 centimeters of length of the 2mm cord. And what I've just done is, you can just put it loosely around your wrist to figure out roughly the size. Then take it off, and because we're going to double it over, I would then obviously measure that against itself again. And then I always just prefer to add a bit extra length just to be sure that we don't run out or we don't have quite enough to finish it off. And that's the same I would do if I was to do a double or triple wrap bracelet. I would just take the cord and then wrap it around my wrist loosely, however many times it is, whether it's 2 or 3, and then obviously take that length and then double that over and add a bit extra again. So that's just how I would recommend to kind of measure the length of cord that you need. And then the thread here, I don't really tend to measure that. I usually just basically spread my arms out wide and then take that length or maybe a bit more. So basically a wingspan to a wingspan and a half, depending on what you're comfortable working with. And then in this case, I've then added my needles onto each end, one on each end here, and then to make it a little bit easier, because obviously it's a long length of thread, but it's going to be doubled over, so it's only half of what we're really going to be working with at a time per needle. And then I've also made sure to put tails on each end through the needle to basically help shorten it while we're working with it. So like this, you can see the tails, and then there, where I have the rest of the thread there. And then as we go, we can just kind of release more of the thread when we need it and we're running out of the thread. That makes it easier to work with and be able to use a long length, but easier to use as we go. So first thing I'm going to do is then take my leather cord here and I put the ends together, so basically doubled it over, because I want to make the loop first of all, if you're using a button there for the closure. And then at the other end here, that's roughly the middle. And I want to make my loop here, and then we're going to start from here and work our way building the bracelet. Keep hold of that, and then I want to use that, tie a knot with it, making sure it stays roughly in the middle here. Just like that. And I just want to kind of tidy up the knot. I want to make sure that the cord is lying next to each other all the way around, ideally. Just looks a bit neater, plus it makes it a little bit less bulky as well, the knot itself. So there we go. And now before we tighten this fully, I'm going to take my button, and obviously we want to test this to make sure the loop is the right size for the button. So you can just kind of maybe keep it in there as you're tightening it. You want it to obviously be able to pass through, so not too tight, but you also don't want it too loose so it might fall out by itself easily. You still want it to be secure. So roughly something like this size. And then you want to make sure to tighten this properly. Give it a nice and tight pull so this knot is going to stay in place. Test it again, and that's going to work just fine. Now what you can do to make sure this is a little bit more secure, you can always add a bit of glue here in that knot. Try and get it right in there if you can. And that's just also going to make sure that this knot isn't going to come undone or pull apart or anything, but it's going to stay where we want it to stay. So just like that, pull it tight, and then we're ready now to start adding in our beads. So then in my case here, I'm going to be working on a mini macrame board just because it's a lot easier. So taking the length of cord that I got ready, and that loop there, the top with a knot, I've just put around one of the slots there, fits perfectly, and then taking the tails all the way down to the bottom, where I've then put one of the lengths on each side down here, and each their own slot right next to each other. So this is now ready on my board. Like I said, it has these notches all the way around, so it's going to be a lot easier to work with it this way and build it up as we go. So now that I've got it ready here, obviously you don't have to use a macrame board, you can also set it up in another way, whatever you find convenient and you have available to you. So I'm then going to get my thread with my needles here ready as well. Have them handy because obviously we need to start out now and adding in the beads. So also we need to get the beads themselves ready. So I have my DiamonDuos here, and like I said, I'm just working with some different colours. So I'm just going to have them all available to me. I have them lying in some piles next to me. And I'm going to be alternating in the colours. So I'm going to start out with the white, 2 white ones, then I'm going to take 2 of the kind of coral colour, and then I'm going to take 2 of the blue, and then repeat like that throughout. So to start out with, what I'm going to do is take my first colour, and that's the white ones here. What I then also like to do, because you want to make sure you kind of pick them up in the right way, and then when you add them into your piece here, obviously, I like to kind of lay them down flat. What you'll find you DiamonDuo is you have a completely flat side on one, that's kind of what I call the back of it, and then on the other side they have this kind of shape to them, almost a bit faceted looking. So I like to lay them so that faces upwards, and then kind of the diamond shape just pointing in this direction. Then you have a hole at the top and a hole at the bottom. And what we need to do is have the beads sit next to each other in here, but in a certain way. So what I'm going to do is pick up my DiamonDuo, and also you want to make sure you just check your DiamonDuos that both holes are clear, because if you obviously use one hole and then the other one's blocked and you go on, you might struggle to get through it, but most of the time you can just kind of clear it with your needle itself. So I've added those onto my needle, and then I'm going to let these drop all the way down, and then they're on my thread now. Obviously what we want to do is get it into here. So to do that, I need to take one of my needles here underneath these cords. I'm just going to bring that obviously with the thread underneath it, bring it all the way to the other side, and this is just to get the beads into the right position. And we have the needle on the other side as well, ready to start using. We then want to bring the beads upwards here, and what you want to make sure to do is however you add your beads onto this first piece of thread, you want to make sure they sit like this, so it's the top hole in the DiamonDuos that you have the thread going through. And then I want to place them underneath the cord, and obviously the beginning can always be the most kind of fiddly a little, because everything is loose, and that's what we're working on now, getting everything set in place. Then what I just want to do as well is kind of try and make sure that I've got even lengths of thread on both sides, just so the beads here sit roughly in the middle. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just roughly like that. So what I'm going to do now is start attaching these to the cord. I'm just going to flip them around so they lay down, and then we have the thread coming out underneath these 2 lengths of cord. Have the beads lying there in the middle. Just push them in, and then I want to take just one needle at a time and go back around the outside of the cord and back on the inside of, just one at a time here, and down through between both lengths of cord. Then I want to pick up my beads again, and I'm picking up the beads in the same hole that I've already gone through. So in that top hole that the thread is already running through. Just through both the beads. And I kind of like to put my fingers on this, especially while it's loose, just to try and make sure nothing moves around too much. And then I just make sure that on the other side here, the cord on the other side, I take my needle underneath that. And then I start to pull all this through. Because right now we want to attach these beads, nice and securely as much as we can before we start adding in any more. Like that. Then I'm going to take the needle from the other side, the one that we haven't gone back through with yet. This is coming out underneath on the left side. Go back up, down between the two lengths of cord, and then pick up the beads and go through them again. Just like we did from the other side. And I'm coming below the cord on the other side there. And then we pull all this through. And again, I'm just holding my finger over it to make it a little bit more secure. Just like that. And then we'll want to, now the beads are basically attached, we want to now get it a bit more secure, but also now slowly start to get the beads in the right position. So you want to try and push them upwards here before we make it too tight as well. As far up as you can get them to go, basically. Like I said, it's going to be a bit fiddly right here at the beginning, but it's going to get easier once we kind of get into the rhythm. And what then obviously is going to happen is the beads are going to end up sitting something like that, with the top part of that curved or angled side next to each other, so they're going to be sticking out a little bit. And now because this is the first few beads, I actually want to go through this again the exact same way. So I'm just going to go around the outside of the cord, through the beads, and then below the cord on the other side. And pull it all the way through. And this is obviously just to make it nice and durable, so it's going to last a long time. So the thread isn't going to break too quickly with wear. And I'm going to do the other side as well. In the exact same way. Just get through it here. Trying to get my needle through both beads. I can at the same time, otherwise you might have to do one at a time. We will probably have to do that throughout the actual bracelet itself, because what you'll find is when these two beads sit next to each other like this, I think I got a little knot here, the holes aren't actually sitting straight next to each other, you could say, like that, and pull it all the way through. They end up actually sitting at an angle. Just like that. And before I tighten this again, I want to just push them up. You probably have to do this a few times. And then start tightening it a little bit. And you'll still be able to move it a bit when we move on. There we go. So now I want to start moving on here to be able to fasten these more, but also start adding in more beads than this. So then in my case here, that means I want to pick up my next colour as well when I get to that point. So I'm going to have them ready here, the next beads. But what I want to do first of all, because these beads have two holes, we need to get into position to be able to add them in. So again, the threads are coming out underneath the cord on the side, and I'm just doing one needle at a time. I'm going around the outside, down between the two cords, and then picking up the bead here that's on the right side as well. But now I'm going through the hole in it that we haven't gone through yet, so just try and capture that. There we go. So that means the bottom hole as we're looking at it here. And then just through that one bead, pull that all the way, thread. So basically the thread now is coming out in the middle of this. And that's where we need to be to add in the new beads. So that was one side, and then I have to do the same on the other side. Basically everything we do on one side we always have to do on the other side. So take your needle, go through around the side of the cord, and then down in between through that one bead on the left side, through the open hole that we haven't gone through yet. Just like that, and now that catches that bead in place. So you can see we now have the two threads coming in towards the middle. And we also now catch the bottom part of those beads. And continue to try and push these upwards. It gets easier when this gets a bit tighter. But just try and do the best you can. I'm now going to pick up my next two beads, so that's these two, it's just this colour that I'm using, and you want to make sure you pick them up in the right way, like I said. So I like to lay them out, imagine how they're going to be sitting in the piece that I've already started here. They basically have to sit the same way that these two do, so that means I lay them like this, and I'm going to go through the top of the beads. And I pick them both up on one needle, and then I like to bring them down this needle a little bit to down the thread. Then I take the needle from the other side while I keep hold of them, and then go through the two beads in the exact same hole but in the opposite direction, just like that. Pull that out, and now as we're pulling this thread from both sides, these beads are going to end up sitting down in the gap in that middle part in between the two previous beads. You can see just like that. So now, obviously right now the thread is coming out in between the beads. What we want to do is make sure the thread comes out to the side. So the one that's now pointing towards the right side, I need to take that from the, in my case, coral bead, and also go through the previous one in the bottom hole of, in my case, the white one. So we're kind of again following a thread path here, you could say, that we've already made. Pull that all the way through, and then do the same thing on the other side. Just following the thread path towards the other side there, and then pull this all the way through. So there we go. Now we can pull this a bit tight, and you'll start to see how the beads are actually going to sit. And again, I want to try and just push this upwards a little bit before I get too much further. You're not going to be able to get it all the way up, but just kind of try and get it up as far as you can. You might have to loosen up the thread a little bit. I think I'm going to have to do that. And then you can obviously re-tighten it, so don't worry too much about doing that. Because I just want to make sure I try and place them in the right position where I want them to sit. So just take a bit of time to do this. Something a bit like that. And then we need to get in position for the next step again. So right now the threads are coming out above the cord, so to just adjust that I need to go down between the two cords, and the one that's towards the right side, just bring it underneath the right cord, out to the side again. And as you can see right now I'm still just kind of holding everything down. I'm not going to keep doing that, it's not going to be necessary, it's just right here at the beginning because everything is still kind of a bit loose. Bring the left one underneath as well. Just like that. There we go. So now for the next step, one needle at a time, is now coming out underneath the cord. I'm going to go around the outside, above it, down, kind of in between the two cords, but I'm now going to pick up the bottom hole of the bead that we just added in. That's open, so just like I showed you before, we're now starting to repeat everything over and over again, and that catches that more in place. Same thing on the other side, bring it around the cord, catch the bead in the bottom hole that we haven't used yet, and kind of bring your threads in towards the middle of the piece here, just like that. And you can see it sits there, and this is then the place we want to add in the next set of beads. And in this case I want to use my third colour, so I'm just going to do these ones to show you one more time. Again, lay them how you want them to sit. It's going to be like this, so I need to go through the top hole in the beads, so they sit next to each other. Bring them down your thread and then take the other needle from the other side and go through the same hole but in the opposite direction of both beads, just like that, and bring that through. And now as we pull this tight, these two beads are going to end up slotting right into perfect position below the previous ones. You can see it's going to sit just like that. And then you want to just remember to go through the bottom hole of the previous beads right above them. And then if you can straight away, you might as well just get your needle out underneath that cord on the side. There, and then the other one, the same thing. Go through the bottom hole so we can get into position for the next section. And pull that all the way. And there we go. So now we need to go around the sides, just catching the bottom part of these beads now that I just added in. Around the side, go through the hole in those beads that we haven't used yet. Pull it all the way through. Same on the other side. Go around, down kind of in between the cords, catch that open hole, and then pull it all the way through. And we're now again in position to add in the next set of beads. So once you obviously just get past the first little section where it's a bit fiddly because it's all loose, and you get into a rhythm, it does end up going quite quickly. So I'm now going to keep going, starting with my white again. That's just the colour choice that I'm using here. Keep going until you reach roughly the length that you think you need. Obviously kind of measure a bit as you go so you don't end up going too far. So I've now reached the end here where I want to start finishing it off. And remember when you're measuring it along the way to account for the size the clasp is going to be as well. So if it's a loop and the button closer that you're doing. But now where I've ended up here, the last two beads that I've added in the middle in between those, as if I was going to add another two beads. But instead of doing that, obviously we have a bit of a gap here now. So I just want to fill that in before I start finishing off the cords themselves. So this is where I'm just going to get my 4mm round or 6/0 seed bead, and this is just what I'm using. You can use whatever you want really to fill that little gap, and you can also use smaller seed beads and use more of them. But I'm just going to be using this one and go through that the same way that I went through the two DiamonDuos when adding them in. So just go through that bead in opposite direction, just like that. And again, I just want to get out to the side because we're at the end now. I just want to also reinforce this end the same as I did in the beginning. So that means I want to go through this section a few times. So I'm just going to get all the way to the sides with my needles here, my thread. You can see that little bead is going to sit right there in the middle and just fill in that gap nicely, so instead of having it too bare. So what I'm going to do is just go through this last little thread path where I have added that bead a few times, just like I did in the beginning, and then we need to start tying off and getting rid of the thread and finishing off the rest. So now to finish off the threads here, I'm just going to work with one at a time, and then obviously do the same with both sides. All I want to do really is tie some knots with the thread, but nice and securely obviously. You don't want the knots to come undone as you wear it. I've got the thread on the one side coming out underneath the cord. What I want to do is go back around the top to come down in between the cords, and then back underneath to come out to the same side again. And I'm coming up kind of through the loop, you could see, like that. And I'm just going to tie a knot here. So I'm going to pick up the loop of thread instead of pulling it all the way tight, and I'm just going to wrap this around my needle a few times. And then as I'm pulling this tight, this is going to basically form a knot like that. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side as well. And then what I'm going to do is go through the beads again, the ones that I've already gone through a few times at the end here. I want to go back through those again, and I'm just going to go through the tip of the DiamonDuo there, because we basically want to try and tie a couple of knots, not just one, but a couple of knots to make sure that in case one knot comes undone somehow, that it's not broken. You've got other knots to kind of save that as well. And what I then want to do is right here, I have some thread in between the DiamonDuo and my 4mm. Obviously if you use something else you'll have thread there anyway, in a different way. I'm going to come down between those two beads but on the inside of that thread. You might just have to maneuver your needle a little bit. It's going to lift up my piece here to get through, and then bring the needle back out. You're kind of almost going underneath that thread bridge that you created between the beads, and then again have a loop here, and I'm just going to do the same thing, put my needle through and then wrap it around a few times, make a bit more of a stronger knot than just doing it once. And as I'm pulling this down, this is going to tie a knot around those threads going through the beads like that, and then I'm just going to take my needle through that 4mm round all the way and pull the thread out, and that's also going to pull that knot a bit nicer into the bead, so you shouldn't really be able to see it at all, but even so it's kind of hidden away anyway. And what I want to do is the same thing with the other side, make those knots come through to the other side and tie a couple more knots on each side with the threads and needles again. So it's really just securing it off, and then in my case I also like to just put a little bit of glue around some of the knots there, and I am going to use this Hypo cement glue. It has a really fine nozzle tip and it dries clear. That's the most important part. Obviously a strong one, but that dries clear so you won't be able to see it. And then cut off the excess thread, and then all that's left to deal with then is the cords themselves. I now got rid of the threads then, and then this is what the piece looks like so far. So all that's left to do, like I said, is finish off the cords themselves and obviously add in the button as well. So in this case I'm just using the Shank button. So what I'm going to do is make sure it's turned the right way, because obviously I want the button to be facing upwards like this. And I'm going to put both of my lengths of cord through the button, through the hole here. So like that, just squeeze them through. It just fits snugly. And then I'm going to pull this all the way up towards the bottom below the beads here. Just going to make sure it sits evenly. Something a bit like that. Just find just the right place, so everything still stays nice and flat and in shape. So something a bit like that is perfect. And then all I'm going to do is, obviously we need to make sure that we kind of put a stopper on the other side of that button, otherwise you can just pull it off. So to do that, all I'm going to do is tie a simple knot. Just take one length over the other and tie a regular knot here. Fasten that, tighten it nice and tight. And then I'm going to do the same thing, because that one knot, because it's leather cord, it kind of comes undone easier, especially if you only tie one knot. So I wouldn't recommend just doing that one knot. I'm still going to use some glue, but I still prefer to do at least 2 knots. It just holds it a bit better. And then I'm going to go over with the other side first. So basically you could say this is kind of a square knot but without the holding cords. Start with one side and then I do the cord from the other side. And just tighten this nicely, as tight as you can. So there we go. And then I'm again going to get on my glue. I just prefer to do this because it holds it much better, because obviously we want to cut off the excess as well. All I'm going to do is get this glue as a really nice fine nozzle tip, and also it dries clear like I said, and I'm just going to get this right basically into the knots. So make sure it gets right in there. So not just around the ends where the cords are coming out, but actually inside the nooks and crannies of the knot on both sides here. Just gives it a much better hold. And obviously you want to let this dry, and then once it's dried, cut off the excess cords here, the lengths, bit nice and tight to the knot, obviously not so it's going to come undone, but that's what the glue is for as well. Cut them off, and then once you've done that and let the glue dry, you have your finished bracelet. And this is then the final piece after finishing off the cords there, the excess cord. And then you just obviously use the button through the loop to close it up, so it's nice and easy to put on and off, and also to wear, because the back of it is this flat side of the DiamonDuo, so it's nice and comfortable as well, and you get this really nice effect. So this is what it looks like. Obviously with my colour choice here you can choose whatever you want to for yours, and it gets this kind of, in my opinion, a bit snake-like effect because of the DiamonDuos, the shape that they have. So So this is what it looks like. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this triple row wraparound bracelet, and it looks like this. So I've used some agate gemstones here in the centre, and then in this case I've just added a rhinestone chain to the outside rows. So it looks like this, and then with a button closure. And this is just what I'm going to show you in this case. You can always use beads instead of the chain, but I'm just going to use the chains just to show you how you can add that as well.